Hello and welcome, college football fans and Georgia fans in particular, whether you're listening from Millage Avenue or the Indiana campus in Bangkok. We'll talk about that. Indiana's got one of the biggest campuses in the entire universe. Very large place, 3 times the enrollment of Ohio State. Campuses all over the world. Campuses in South Bend, Indiana, of all places. This little school suddenly became good in football. This tiny little Indiana never had nothing happen in football ever. And now they're good. At least Mark Cuban thinks they can be. Because they're backed by a billionaire who doesn't mind throwing away money. What money does today. We'll talk about all of that. You can't get away from the money when you talk college football, so we'll have to talk about it. I winning the championship, actual dollars per school, and how it changes with every school. We did some math, and would it be worth it to win a national title? Would Indiana make a profit if they even win the whole thing? And what about Miami? Miami's back! They seem to be. They're in the finals. That's as back as they've been in a while. But nobody's talking about Miami. They're saying they're going to get blown out by Indiana. They're the best team ever. They're comparing Indiana to the 2019 LSU team. They don't mention the Georgia 21-22 team. Never heard anybody compare Indiana to that team. Or I've never heard anybody compare the LSU team to that team, actually. Except a couple Cajuns who simply not worth the time. You got to deal with facts, or your opinion don't matter, Mr. Cajun. But there's a lot of facts that 2019 LSU team might be the best team ever. Even better than our 21-22 Dogs. Maybe. Possibly. We could argue about it, but we're in that discussion. But will we ever have another team that gets in that discussion? You don't get into that discussion about dropping your first round game again and again. The SEC's down. That's what we're going to talk about. The SEC's down, is it? Well, it looks like it is. But I don't know if it's a long-term down, but certainly the SEC is ropping and roaring. They haven't had a team in the playoffs in 3 years. Georgia's had a lot to do with that. We've been the best team, and we dropped the ball. So maybe the SEC is down. Georgia's down. Maybe. We could talk about all that, and we're going to talk about how much money you can make winning a national title. And thank goodness we don't have to lose that much money. No, I don't know. The way they break it down makes a difference. You got to share with your conference. Yada, 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 but there's still money to be made by winning a national title. By the time you advance the playoff round, you make more money. Kind of like a circus act. The longer you stay, the more you make. But expenses go up and up and up. Will it always be profitable to win in the current environment? That's the key. Because I don't think you can. I don't think they're going to change the laws of physics, and anybody that's trying to win in college football is going to spend a certain amount more than they've ever spent in any sport for players. There's a limit. There's a historical limit that's never been broken. For professional teams, they've never spent more than this percentage. I'll tell you that percentage later, but it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed ever for an annual number. For 150 years. So you think anybody's going to challenge that by spending more than that for players? Yes, they're doing it now, but how long can you continue bucking that historical trend? My guess is not very long. Let me get my breath. I'll be back in a minute. Spoke earlier about that magic number, that percentage that all pro sports teams adhere to, that 6% of revenue. total revenue is the 150-year speed of light limit on spending for player payroll. Doesn't count administrative costs and everything. Payroll costs, 6% has been the gold standard in pro sports. It's been the absolute limit, and no team's gone over it on an annual basis. Not even when the Yankees signed Babe Ruth did they go over that 6% of revenue. Now, revenue is often misunderstood. This 6% would be your actual revenue, not necessarily what you show to the IRS. But that seems to be the limit. Now, how does college football go over that? How do they get by that? Well, you could maybe call it investing in the future. Go over the limit for a while to get your foot in the door and get entrenched. That would be similar to, say, paying a franchise fee to get an NFL franchise. You pay a whole lot of money to get the right to build a team. Well, maybe that's what Indiana's and such are doing. But they are nonetheless exceeding that 6% of their revenue. Indiana's going to spend $60 million this year. They still might not win a title. And there's no way that's going to fall into a 6% revenue. At least not for the numbers they show. So how long can this continue? Well, my thinking is not very long. But in the meantime, it could be the wild, wild west. And that partially explains why the SEC could be perceived as being in decline or is down. Most SEC teams, they aren't hooked up to a Mark Cuban, and they're not hooked up to, corporate donations quite in that manner. The largest personal donation for Georgia was $4 million last year, and they had a lot of influence and still do. Just imagine what $60 million would do. So it's a money game for right now. But does that really mean you can't win if you only spent $20 million and Indiana spent $60? Oh, no, it doesn't. Winning doesn't really relate to money. It does give you the ability to get the players you want in the portal. It does give you a definitive edge in acquiring talent. But even that isn't any guarantee of winning. Georgia roughly spent about $20 million last year. Their stated value of the franchise, if you will, is about $1.4 billion. You have to consider that. So had they spent $60 million, they would have really infringed on spending way too much to the value of the organization. Indiana's value is nowhere near that. It doesn't even rank in the top 50. So obviously what's happening there is kind of like the NFL does with franchise fees. They're just investing in future, success. What makes Indiana work truly is evaluation. If you're going to throw top dollar and win in the transfer portal by outbidding, you better be bidding on the right guy. You better have a good plan to how to use all these players. Statistical information shows that talent alone is not an indicator of success. You have to have a good scheme. You have to be playing football with the right mindset, and you also have to understand some realities about the game. The game has changed. A mobile quarterback is generally good for a certain amount of extra wins. Mobility is the new currency. The NFL has discovered that, and colleges have started to lean that direction, and it's only going to get more so. But a quarterback is just the tip of the iceberg to an offensive scheme, offensive system. When you have all the things in place, the quarterback gets the credit. But in many cases, another quarterback could probably do the job. If the offensive line is exemplary, the offensive line is really good, the wide receivers are really good, they run good route trees, they have a very good offensive scheme. The quarterback that is in behind center is going to get credit for operating in a good system. So, and then that gets enlarged because the quarterback does get credit, and therefore he gets paid, and people buy quarterbacks without having the system, to benefit from that quarterback. So the college game is going to have to get a lot more like the pro game in the evaluation. They're going to have to get a lot more like the pro game in execution. They're going to have to get a lot more like the pro game in the way they micro manage assets, players, and information and knowledge. So a lot of the current coaches in college simply aren't going to be qualified to be great evaluators. And that's just going to be one of the skills you'll need. You have to evaluate your talent. You know what you want to achieve on a football field. You have to know who can give you that. And that's why Indiana is a step away from having a national title. It isn't because they suddenly threw money, although it did, take money. You have to have the money, but the money alone's not going to get it done. So just to wrap it up on that angle, the salary cap, I think, and a real salary cap, because now they only control NIL, but like a Mark Cuban donation can be spent. It's not NIL, it's a gift. Until they get some kind of real salary cap, I think we're going to have the Wild Wild West. But I sort of lean to the theory that in time, college football, as it becomes more of a pro sport, will have to follow the pro rule. And one of those rules is a 6% payroll cost for players. And so that's the way it is.